Act 1. The rising tension in Rome. The play opens with the streets of Rome in a festive uproar. The common people, or plebeians, are celebrating Julius Caesar's triumphant return after his victory over Pompey, his former ally turned rival. However, the celebration is marred by political tension. Two Roman tribunes, Flavius and Marullus, who are loyal to the Republic and wary of Caesar's growing influence, scold the revellers for their fickle allegiance, reminding them that they once cheered for Pompey. The tribunes then move to strip the decorations from Caesar's statues, attempting to curb the public's adulation of him. Meanwhile, Caesar himself is making his way through the streets, accompanied by a procession that includes his wife Calpurnia, his loyal friend Mark Antony, and others. As they pass, a soothsayer steps forward and warns Caesar to beware the Ides of March. Caesar dismisses the soothsayer as a dreamer and continues on his way. In a more private setting, Cassius, a shrewd and ambitious senator, begins to express his deep concern about Caesar's power to Brutus, a respected senator and Caesar's close friend. Cassius, who is envious of Caesar, subtly flatters Brutus and questions why a man no greater than themselves should hold such power over Rome. Brutus, who genuinely loves Caesar but is troubled by the implications of his potential rise to monarchy, listens intently but remains undecided. The act ends with Cassius making it clear that he will work to turn Brutus against Caesar. He knows that Brutus's noble reputation will lend credibility to any action they might take against Caesar. Act 2. The conspiracy takes shape. As the Ides of March approach, Brutus finds himself increasingly troubled. He walks in his garden, torn between his love for Caesar and his fear that Caesar's rule will lead to tyranny. In the early morning, Brutus receives a series of forged letters, crafted by Cassius but seemingly from concerned Roman citizens, urging him to take action against Caesar for the good of the Republic. Convinced that the only way to protect Rome is to prevent Caesar from becoming a dictator, Brutus decides to join the conspiracy. That night, the conspirators gather at Brutus's home. Cassius, along with Casca, Decius Brutus, Cinna, Metellus Cimber, and Trebonius, discuss their plans. Cassius suggests that they also kill Mark Antony, Caesar's close ally, fearing that he will be a dangerous adversary if left alive. However, Brutus argues against this, believing that they should be seen as sacrificers, not butchers, and that Antony poses no threat without Caesar. The conspirators agree to assassinate Caesar the next day in the Senate. Meanwhile, Caesar is at his home, where his wife Calpurnia has been troubled by ominous dreams. She dreams of Caesar's statue spurting blood, while smiling Romans bathe their hands in it. Deeply disturbed, she begs Caesar to stay home on the Ides of March. Though initially swayed by her fears, Caesar's pride and the persuasive words of Decius Brutus, one of the conspirators, convince him otherwise. Decius reinterprets the dream as a positive omen and suggests that the Senate may crown him king that day. Flattered and determined not to appear weak, Caesar decides to go to the Senate. Act 3. The assassination of Caesar. On the Ides of March, Caesar makes his way to the Senate house, ignoring the repeated warnings of the soothsayer and a letter from Artemidorus, a teacher who has discovered the conspiracy and tries to warn Caesar. However, Caesar dismisses the letter, saying that matters concerning himself will be dealt with last. Upon arriving at the Senate, the conspirators surround Caesar under the guise of presenting a petition. Metellus Cimber begs for the pardon of his exiled brother, which Caesar refuses, declaring himself as immovable as the North Star. This moment of self-proclaimed invincibility is interrupted as Casca suddenly strikes the first blow, stabbing Caesar. The other conspirators follow, stabbing him repeatedly. When Caesar sees Brutus among his attackers, he utters the famous line, "Et tu, Brute?" "And you, Brutus," before succumbing to the fatal wounds. With Caesar dead, the conspirators proclaim that tyranny has been overthrown. They bathe their hands in Caesar's blood, symbolizing the sacrifice they believe they've made for the freedom of Rome. Brutus tries to calm the panicked senators and explains that they will explain their actions to the Roman people, certain that they will understand and support them. At this moment, Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal friend and ally, arrives. Although shocked and devastated by Caesar's murder, Antony cleverly hides his true feelings. He shakes hands with the conspirators, pledging his loyalty, but inwardly he vows revenge. Antony asks if he may speak at Caesar's funeral, and after some debate, Brutus agrees, over Cassius's objections, on the condition that Antony does not blame the conspirators in his speech and speaks only after Brutus has addressed the crowd. Act 4. The Power Struggle. The scene shifts to Caesar's funeral. Brutus speaks first, addressing the gathered citizens. He explains that he loved Caesar, but loved Rome more, and that Caesar's ambition would have enslaved the people. The crowd, moved by Brutus's sincerity, appears to support the conspirators, agreeing that Caesar's death was necessary. Then Antony takes the stage. In a masterful speech, he follows Brutus's request to not speak ill of the conspirators, repeatedly referring to them as honourable men. However, with each repetition, Antony's tone grows more sarcastic, subtly undermining their actions. He stirs the crowd by recounting Caesar's virtues and reading his will, which leaves money and public parks to the citizens of Rome. Antony's oration sways the crowd into a frenzy, turning them against the conspirators. The mob riots, and the city of Rome is thrown into chaos. As civil unrest spreads, Brutus and Cassius flee the city, gathering forces to prepare for the inevitable conflict with Antony and Octavius, Caesar's adopted heir, who has returned to Rome and joined forces with Antony and Lepidus to form the Second Triumvirate. Act 5. The Fall of the Conspirators. The final act takes place on the plains of Philippi, where the forces of Brutus and Cassius face off against those of Antony and Octavius. Before the battle, Brutus and Cassius hold a tense discussion in their camp. Cassius admits to Brutus that he fears the worst, and they speak of the possibility of defeat. Brutus remains stoic, but reveals that he has seen the ghost of Caesar, who promised they would meet again at Philippi, a sign that foreshadows their doom. The battle begins, and at first it seems that Brutus's forces are winning. However, a series of miscommunications and strategic errors lead to their downfall. Cassius, misled by faulty information that his forces are losing, orders his servant Pindarus to kill him. Believing that Brutus has been defeated, Cassius dies by the same sword that killed Caesar. Brutus, discovering Cassius's body, mourns the loss of his friend but continues the fight. However, as his forces are overwhelmed, Brutus realizes that all is lost. Rather than be captured and paraded through Rome as a prisoner, Brutus asks his friend Strato to hold his sword while he runs onto it, ending his life. In the aftermath, Antony and Octavius stand victorious. Antony, reflecting on the events, praises Brutus as the noblest Roman of them all, recognizing that unlike the other conspirators, Brutus acted out of what he believed was the greater good for Rome, rather than out of envy or personal ambition. Octavius orders that Brutus be given an honourable burial, signalling the end of the conflict and the beginning of a new era in Rome. The play closes with the triumph of Antony and Octavius, setting the stage for the eventual rise of the Roman Empire. But the tragedy also leaves a lingering sense of loss for the republic that Brutus sought to protect, illustrating the devastating consequences of political betrayal and the complex interplay of fate and free will